The local church, as God designed it, is the hope of the world. That is a really, really big statement. And we're going to take the next 6 weeks together to unpack what we mean by that statement and knowing that it's a huge claim. And we've spent quite a bit of time now talking through our key values as a church, and not just as a church, but the things that we think are most important for us as we follow Jesus: the cross, the yoke, the Bible, the church, and the city. And now together we're going to spend 6 weeks on the church. It's a long time. We're pastors. We love the local church. We think it's super important. Tom, why should everybody care about this church?
Isn't it interesting that as pastors, we can be perceived as being sort of self-promotional. We talk about local church, yay! But really, when we look at Scripture, we understand the importance of the local church. When Jesus said he would build this church and he gave us the Great Commission to make disciples of all peoples, the disciples understood that through the lens of establishing local churches throughout the Roman Empire, didn't they? And we missed that. And Paul, writing to the Ephesians, which is one of the greatest letters that talks about the church, not only the universal church, which is important, but the centrality of the local church. And he writes to a local church in Ephesus, and he begins with this marvelous text. And I want to read just a couple verses here in chapter 1. He says, "In love before him," verse 4, "he predestined us." I love that because he didn't just predestine me. He did, but he predestined us, and notice, to be adopted as sons, or sons and daughters, that means both, through Jesus Christ for himself, according to the good pleasure of his will. Paul understood the mystery and wonder of the local church as God designed it is the hope of the world. It was the primary way that God would bring redemption to the world, to all peoples, to all things. And I love that. And what I've increasingly begun to understand is how central that is, that the local church is uniquely designed to do what it only can do in the world. And also, unique to the local church is loved by Jesus. It is called the bride of Christ. And the more we follow Jesus, the more we love what he loves. So the local church, as God designed it, truly is the hope of the world. And that's not just self-serving. That is dead on what the Scripture teaches.
You know, what really grabs me in those two verses is the word adoption. Although it's a legal term, it has great personal value. You know, from a cosmic or theological perspective, how humbling. I mean, God cared enough about me to adopt me. It was initiated by him. It wasn't initiated by me. And, you know, coming from the existential perspective, then I moved to the family concept of the local church. And although we need the paper, the codicil, as a critical path element, nothing happens without it. How does an adopted child receive food, shelter, love, discipline? How does a child receive or learn how to get outside of their own personal echo chamber of people that agree with them and learn the disagree with their siblings? By being in the family, in the home. And that's what is a beautiful picture of the local church. They deliver that warmth, that shelter, that love, and that discipline.
Yeah, it's almost like Ephesians is the adoption papers, and the home, though, is the church. It's his people gathered together.
Now, that raises another question that kind of puzzles me is, why start a church? Both of you have done it. Tom, you did it earlier. Tom, or Nathan more recently. But a startup, although has hard work, everybody has hard work. But a startup has increased personal risk. Why do that? Why the increased risk? Why are you willing to do that?
Well, as I said, I think the Scriptures call us to plant churches because the church, the local church, is at the very heart of God's plan in the world. It's a scary endeavor. It was for Paul, and it is for anyone who begins a good work. But that is how God's mission advances. And so when we began Christ Community many years ago, we had this conviction that God had called us to this kind of work. And it is vitally important to take steps of faith. We didn't have tons and tons of faith, but we had a big God. And so God, again, continues to use faith in a big God to accomplish his purposes in the local church. So yes, it's risky. Yes, it's challenging. And from the very beginning, we had a mission statement that guided us. And I love the picture that our mission statement begins with this caring family imagery, as you unpack so well, that it is a family. And the local church is the new creation family we lost in the garden. So it invites everyone in who knows Christ into this new family. So that's what we started the mission, to be a caring family, right? Our mission statement of multiplying disciples, influencing our community and world for Jesus Christ. This is our mission. This is what leads us to this entrepreneurial effort.
Yeah. Well, I just love even historically. I mean, this is what the Apostle Paul did. He started somewhere between 14 and 20 local churches himself.
It's a lot of work.
Well, and in a world in which people had no idea who Jesus was. I mean, just to imagine the complexities of doing that, 14 to 20 of them. And now us looking back 2,000 years later, I mean, it literally changed our world. Like in ways that we can't even begin to understand or imagine. Like our world is different because of what he did. And studies continue to show that the most effective way to reach people with Jesus, the most effective way to be able to transform a local community is through the start of new churches.
And that kind of speaks to the delivery system we've chosen in the multi-site environment. The intimacy of local, smaller parishes, if you will. And now I need to be careful, I'm not denigrating large churches in any way. There are great manifestations of that, but we've chosen the local multi-site variety where you're large enough to equip with good, solid resources, but yet that warmth, that love, that is delivered in a more intimate setting. And we've been blessed because as over the years we've given ourselves away, we've been diligent in giving ourselves away, we've seen the fruit of that many times over.
Well, Tom, I want to hear from you. You started Christ Community in 1989. What was your hope as you set out to do that?
It's amazing to think back where the three of us, Liz and my young son Schaefer, we got in a Ryder truck, 24-footer, drove from Dallas to Kansas City, and pretty overwhelming, this task. And one of the things that most people don't realize is I flunked the church planning self-assessment test. So I'm probably not the best church planner to do it, did you?
I didn't take
it. It is amazing to think, our hope was that God would use us in ways, I think, to bring a local church into existence and for God to bless it to be a multiplying entity, an enterprise that really had a heart for spiritual awakening. And over the years, we've seen how God is using Christ Community in amazing ways to be a catalyst for spiritual awakening. So I think somehow, in my own vain presumption and God's faith, as I drove to Kansas City, I think in my heart was, oh Lord, build a church for your glory, but also to be a catalyst for spiritual awakening. We are so desperately in need of awakening in our culture and our world. And I think my hope was that in some way we could be a part of this grand spiritual awakening. And what a delight to see in these years how God continues to use us and build us not only in Kansas City, but across the country. And so God is very faithful, and the local church is his hope for the world, and we need to be fully that.
Well, yeah, and now for us to be able to take that to other places, other communities, to start in Olathe, downtown, Brookside, and Shawnee Mission. But we have a long ways to go. Yes, we believe together the local church as God designed it is the hope of the world, and we need to unpack that over these next several weeks together. But we believe that because it is the place where this miracle of adoption happens, where miraculously we who were enemies with God become sons and daughters.
And we must not lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing. We're to deliver Christian education, we're to tell others about Jesus, but at the same time we need to allow a spot for spiritual formation so that we can equip our family to transform their workplace, their homes, their neighborhoods, and our culture.
Yeah, the gospel profoundly speaks into every nook and cranny of life. And we need to capture that full mission. And I think what captures my heart too is that from the very beginning we've had bold faith. And as we move forward, God continues to call us to live out that bold faith. God honors faith, right? And so when we look at Christ Community, we thank God for the past. But I believe the most fruitful days of Christ Community are ahead of us. If we stay on task, if we stay on mission, if we stay focused on being a caring family, on multiplying disciples, influencing our community and work for Jesus Christ. I really believe God has blessed us and given us favor, and I believe God will continue to do that as we stay faithful to Him, for His glory, right? For His glory. And as I think about that, I just pray that God would lead us in that direction and continue to be faithful to us.
Yeah. So Tom, what's your next step for us as we want to embrace that, we want to have that bold faith? What should we be doing?
Yeah, I would just say that I've never been more encouraged and excited about Christ's community than I am today. And I think as we continue to pray, a couple things come to my mind. One is that we would be faithful disciples of Jesus Christ in all dimensions of life. But not only faithful, God would bless us with fruitfulness in ways that we could not imagine. Because Jesus says, those who abide in Him and are His disciples, they bear much fruit for His glory. And my prayer for Christ's community is that the years ahead would be more fruitful than we ever imagined for His glory. So I pray for faithfulness and fruitfulness for His glory.